and business performance. We have a very exciting format for you today and two very dynamic speakers. Honest, we really do. Just switching slides here. Sorry about that. We are very happy to have Meagen Eisenberg with us, VP of Demand Generation at DocuSign, and Meagen is going to share with us their journey at DocuSign. Prior to DocuSign, she was with Hewlett-Packard and held a series really, of senior marketing leadership positions. And then we also have Robert Moreau, CEO of the Zyphias Group, with us as well, and he's got a great background and expert in sales, marketing, alignment, business analytics, consult for very established companies like GE, Adobe, and IBM, and he also does some presentation and consulting work with Forrester and Gartner and many other established analysts. So thank you both for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here. And then I'm Shannon Balance, the moderator, CEO of MobilePass, the sales effectiveness tool, and we'll give you a little highlight of what that's about today as well. So let's get started. Our first part of the webinar is how to empower your sales team to meet customer needs. And it's quite a daunting task, easier said than actually done. We know from the Averaging Research Group that those who actually do the alignment perform better, both in annual sales and the other laggard organizations. But it's, like I said, it's a hard thing to do. Robert, who has helped many companies address this process, start right in. Tell us, where do you begin?
Well, I think one of the biggest important aspects of this is really to really understand your customer's journey, to understand the fact that we have gone beyond the point of just, and we'll talk a little bit here in a few minutes about the customer buying process, but we've gone beyond the point of just looking at implicit and explicit information, and more so to the point of really understanding that there's an emotional aspect to people's buying decisions. And some examples of those might include confusion, hesitation, concern. And so as you look at sales enablement, salespeople really need a lot more tools today. The vast majority, and we'll talk a little bit later about this, and I know Meagen will probably touch on it as well, of the buying process is done prior to engaging the brand. And so understanding really the true dynamic of what your customers go through, not just what they tell you or what potential website they visit or content they read, but also what are some of the emotional aspects of that journey that they go through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. The next piece is really about what is a customer journey. And the customer journey is a new concept, or at least it's something that we've heard a lot more discussion about over the last couple of years. The customer buying process is really the foundation of that customer journey or customer journey map, which might be the end result of the process that I'm going to be talking about for a few minutes today. Some key points here. It really is an evolution in how an organization thinks about their customer engagement. It's buyer-centric, so if you think a little bit about how we may have thought of things in the past, it really is something that is much more focused on the buyer and what they go through versus the idea that you as an organization can actually drive, or I guess I could argue there is some opportunity to influence the buying process, but it's really something that the buyer owns today. And so customers interact across multiple touch points. If you're a B2b firm, you've probably got a few touch points that maybe a B2c firm might not. But really you're looking at sales, you're looking at the internet, and if you move into a more direct, whether it be brick and mortar e-commerce area, you start to add additional touch points. And so understanding that journey and where those touch points fit and how you can best optimize it is important. The other key point here is that different customers take different journeys. And where I'm coming from here, where we are coming from in terms of our message here, is that you have to understand that if I am going to be looking at renewing a product, service, or solution, that's a very different journey than I'm going to take, say, if I am having an issue with a product or service. So just make sure you have the clear understanding that it is both emotional and subconscious, as well as explicit and implicit activities that really look to drive that understanding of what that buying process, or I should say customer journey, might look like.
Well, and Robert, a lot of organizations recently have moved to a much stronger in-house kind of lead management process and cultivating those sales opportunities up front as part of that marketing role. How has that changed that buying process or that buying journey?
It's an excellent question. You know, when I co-founded Rubicon Marketing Group, and one of the things we did early on was talk a lot about what is lead management, and that's a very company-focused, or I would argue internally focused concept. Not to say it doesn't have its place, and it's not tremendously important. And Megan, I know we'll talk about here in a little while what those stages or those states of those given leads might be. But really understanding the customer journey is more of a customer-focused, or I would say buyer-centric dynamic. So one of the examples that we're providing today is that 70% of the buying process is done prior to engaging sales. And this is just an example for everybody, provided by Forrester. You can find examples with Gardner, a number of other analysts that kind of give you some perspective on how those different states or those phases can be broken down. So, I think that's probably the best answer I could give you, Shannon, in terms of how the difference in terms of focus is created when you compare those two concepts.
Okay. Megan, anything you'd add to that from your experience at DocuSign? I know you were going to address some of the specifics later, but just to reference Robert's slide.
With what Robert's been saying, much more of the buying process is done before sales even contacts them, so it just puts even more on what we're doing as marketers and sales together to help them along the way.
And I would throw one more thing out there, which is, we probably have both B2b and B2c audiences today. So this is a B2b example. And when you look at B2C, depending upon your solution or service, it could be a much shorter buying process for your customers, and that journey could be much different. So it could be very transactional. Banks, for example, are going to be very different from, say, the experiences that DocuSign's customers might have. But I know, being a customer of DocuSign and loving the solution they provide, that me as a person, consumer, looks at that value proposition differently than, say, I might as a business. And so Megan actually has to address both of those dynamics at some level, and she'll probably speak to that as we move on, or at least I'm kind of throwing her out there to do that.
Yes. And it's true, our sales cycle for our B2C business versus our B2B is very different, and the types of content that we deliver to the different audiences is very different, and even the tone of voice we use is different.
Oh yeah, no, I bet. Well, we do have a variety of different sized firms on the call. Some smaller companies around the 50 to 100 million, all the way up to the $1 billion stages. So, Robert, where do you even begin to identify that journey to start mapping that process? Kind of keeping in mind the different sizes of companies on the call with us today.
Absolutely, excellent question. The biggest thing, and I think the one point that I would like to make on this is you've got to talk to your customers. I can't say how many times I have walked into, and it can go right down the list from Eli Lilly to GE to a small $6 million company here in our wonderful city of Portland, Oregon, that people don't leverage the accessibility that they have to their customers. And it's always surprised me. So I think, whether you're a large or a small company, looking at what that research phase might look like, just starting with your current customers can give you a tremendously large wealth of knowledge. As you get bigger and larger in your overall market share or size of firm, while on one end you might have more resources, it sometimes doesn't necessarily give you as much accessibility. So I think that the most important thing is just really looking at how can I leverage the qualitative and quantitative research within my both internal customer base, but also in what are some of the other areas that I can gain information, from my customers. And the big term today is big data, and I think I may mention it, in the next slide. But reality is, it's just about leveraging information that can give you insight that you can take action from.
So can you give us a specific example, Robert, on like maybe how a small company with only a few people in the marketing department might go about this process, versus a much larger company, B2b or B2c, whichever you want to draw on?
No, it's a great question. I think to put it in its most simple terms, research has to be focused on your customers. Take a look at mapping and documenting what that buying process is. And in doing that, make sure you look at some of your sales information. So whether you're using Salesforce or another CRM, really take a look at what does that sales cycle look like. Identify key customer interactions and pain points. So a lot of people don't understand, or I should say don't understand, don't make visible to their internal company or their internal organization that customers have multiple interactions with your company. So addressing those things as well as what are the key pain points become tremendously important. The next thing really is developing personas. So start with a few. It has kind of been a buzzword over the last couple of years, but I think very few companies do a great job of truly identifying what those personas are. So, review your buyer insights and what does the analytics look like, and what do the sales and marketing reports look like. I'm a huge advocate, and we'll talk about this later on in the presentation, for having 3 legs to the stool. And Shannon, to your point, a smaller company is probably not going to have a CRM, a marketing automation, or marketing technology platform, as well as a business intelligence platform. But getting at least, whether it's CRM and your marketing technology, to work together to get you the right information becomes tremendously important. But you got to look at what kind of personal information can you know about your customers and prospects. What's their function and role?
Like, regardless of the company size, the information is there. It just depends on maybe how big of a sample and how you want to go about extracting and analyzing that information. So even the small companies should be able to.
Absolutely. And there's so many things today that when I look back at the last, I would say, 5 years, are important. Like, how is somebody engaging with your brand in terms of the platform? Is it mobile? Is it on-site, etc.? So I don't want to dive too much into developing personas, because literally I can easily spend a half hour, if not 45 minutes, on just walking people through exactly how to do that. And I'm happy to provide some additional content around that specific topic. But I want to make sure and get through the next couple points. And the next point is really tracking content consumption. There's so many companies out there that are so quick to create new content, create a new white paper, do a new webinar. And what becomes more important than just creating new content is tracking how is the content being used, because it does 2 things. It creates, I would argue, a much lower threshold for budget that is necessary on creating content if you're able to leverage content that either can be refined or is better suited for a specific audience. So I think one of the big things, and whether you're leveraging a solution like Eloqua, where you have a resource center, and other aspects of those kinds of technologies, IBM Unica is another good example, you can really track how are people consuming content within the fact that they're at a certain stage of that buying process. And then the last piece of this is taking all of those first 5 points, combining them, and really creating a customer journey or buyer journey map. And in a lot of cases, there are multiple journeys that a customer might go through, and I kind of hit on that earlier. But it's all a combination of those things. And I think the biggest point I want to make on this point the biggest point I'd want to make on this specific section is listen to your customers. Leverage the data that you have, and beyond that, be willing to refine, measure, and continue to adjust based on what it is you're hearing, what it is you're learning, and what your customers are telling you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, as you're going through this process and you're doing a better job of listening to your customers, understanding what content is consumed and valued by your customers, how do you pull all that back to, full circle to really the start of the section, how it enables salespeople?
Great question. I think when you really look at an organization today, different from, let's say, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, marketing and sales have to be a team. And they have to drive revenue. They have to drive business value. So when I look at this specific area in terms of customer journey, and we're going to talk about some other areas as we move forward today, it's really about enabling marketing to better document where they belong in the role of that journey. And I think what's changed tremendously, and Meagen can probably chime in on this, is that marketing is no longer they're just in the early phase of the buying process. They have to be involved and be able to communicate with sales what they're learning and how it's working. And they're also involved in loyalty. I'm a sales guy. So once a deal gets closed, a lot of salespeople are on to the next opportunity. And they don't always do the best job of leveraging the ultimate value of that customer through channels like loyalty and upsell and cross-sell. So marketing really represents, as does sales, a team for a lot of CEOs. I know I was at the Institute of Business Value retreat recently for the IBM team, and it's when you talk to a CEO or a senior person at a lot of these companies, Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000, et cetera, they're looking at marketing and sales as a team. So when we really think about some of the stuff that we've talked about over the last few minutes, it speaks to getting the sales team better tools and better information. Nothing's more frustrating as a salesperson than a company going dark or an individual going dark within that sales cycle. So how can I leverage this information to better assist or enable my sales team, and specifically to marketing? I have mentioned it earlier, is that, content marketing, and I know one of the things that I would give huge kudos to DocuSign on is they do a really good job here, is looking at what types of content can be used and leveraged that is more buyer-centric, that's more focused on your buyer. So this is a specific area that, for those of you in the on the webinar, can probably attest to. Content marketing is a hugely popular topic, but it's not just about making noise. You have to have the right content, the right people at the right time, and be able to analyze and really understand it at almost a scientific level how that can best be used.
Well, and it sounds like what you're saying are the barriers between what was in the past sales, marketing, customer retention, or support are really coming down. It's one continuous support process, and marketing almost sounds like, in your mind, kind of the glue that ties them all together. Or is that correct, or would you?
If it was up to me, marketers would make commissions.
I love it. What do you think? Right, Meagen?
I think it's about acquire, keep, and grow. As a marketer, we have to think about those three buckets. We need to acquire new ones, we need to keep them happy and engaged, and then we need to grow the footprint.
Acquire, keep, and grow. Perfect. Well said. Absolutely. Anything you'd add to this slide, Meagen, from a marketing, kind of position, Robert, coming from the sales perspective?
I mean, I agree with everything he's saying. It's understanding what the buyer, what are the gates the buyer has to get through in order to buy your solution. And a lot of times the only way you're going to learn that is working with sales, understanding what are the barriers they have to overcome, what kind of content can you prepare for them. So, it's not just top of the funnel content, it's when they're in the sales cycle, really helping them with that. And then, providing overhead through drip campaigns or nurture programs while they're engaging with your company.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think that's really a perfect segue into this next section. Let's hear how you did it. That's what everyone's here for. So how did you approach that sales marketing alignment challenge at DocuSign?
Yeah, so very excited to be here. Just a little bit about DocuSign so you can understand our business and how it would relate to yours. We are a SaaS business. We are B2b and B2c. We want to empower anyone to sign anything, anywhere. And really for marketers and sales, we're helping you close business faster on the contract side of it, keeping it online and trackable. So that's about what I'll go through on DocuSign. But if we dive into what we did at DocuSign to align marketing sales, about 2 years ago, and go ahead if you want to go forward on the next slide, we met as a team to really understand what it was going to take to be successful from a demand gen standpoint and a partnership. And some things we had in mind here, you see some stats that probably shouldn't be foreign to you from, we've heard them from Gartner, we've heard them from Serious Decisions. The buyer's journey is happening online, it's happening on your website. Majority of your leads are coming in from the website. So what are you doing with that to empower your sales team, to make sure the buyer has what they need to be successful in buying your product? And if 52% of it is lost because of the failure of sales enablement, that's something both marketing and sales needs to own, because that your alignment with sales is business critical. And we saw that at DocuSign by aligning and working together, the acceleration of our results. And if you go to the next slide, there were 3 things when I think about what was the success of our alignment 2 years ago. 1, we built the models together. So really important you're working as a team and understanding each other and listening. 2 was having transparency in results. Some things are going to work and some things are not. You have to be able to disclose both in order to build that trust. You have to be willing to say, hey, I was wrong, or I could have been better, and be okay with that and understand that. And 3rd, just constant communication. It's not enough to talk and meet once and then not talk for a quarter or a year until things aren't working the way you want them to. It's much better to have a nice cadence where you're communicating with your sales team what's coming up, what's working, what's not. And so if we start out with the first step with build together.
I would have to say, I'm going to chime in on that because I think you bring up a great point here, which is culture. I think Meagen has driven a culture within DocuSign and that makes these things possible. And I think that one of the most important things, because I think most companies today realize, or at least they should, that sales and marketing alignment is very important. But
we hear from a number of companies, Robert, that we talk with that they really struggle. I mean, they know they should do this, they see the benefit in it, but actually bringing the sales and marketing teams together for that alignment, building together common goals is really hard. So very impressed. Meagen, perhaps if you have any kind of tips or advice for our audience on just how to really instill or bring that culture about.
Yeah, so I'm definitely happy to go into that. If you go to the next slide, really when I think about build together and what we did right at DocuSign, 2 years ago when we were evaluating our marketing automation platform, which we ended up selecting Eloqua, part of that was really looking at our existing model and really understanding our, the buyer's journey, how it mapped to the sales cycle. So what you see across the top is the buyer's journey that we use. Now there's different derivatives of this, and probably all of them are right. You just need to pick one and not be afraid of it, and then map out that process. What are the gates you need to get through? Meeting with the sales team. Okay, we've established a need. They've filled out a form, and they're learning about us, evaluating us. When you're engaged with a prospect, what type of content are you sending them, or what type of content do you wish you had available to you to send to them? And really doing an inventory. Looking at the different stages, what content makes most sense, what do you have and what do you not have, and as a marketing team, go curate or create that content and let them know that you're working on it so they're more successful in aligning their sales cycle to the buyer's journey. So really having that discussion, mapping out our content, understanding the buyer, and doing that with sales, providing the models, but allowing them to check and provide feedback. And what you get out of that is a much stronger content strategy and content map. And then I think the second thing that was really important for our sales team was just understanding the entire lead life cycle to closed won. What, not just the model, but how it actually enters your system, how it enters your, we have Eloqua, your marketing automation platform, how it is scored, how it syncs to the CRM, how the inside sales or SDR team actually works that lead, how they mark the lead, how it progresses to an opportunity and close. And just by having those discussions and mapping it out, you will, one, find a lot of inefficiencies that you can make more efficient. Two, they'll feel like you're understanding their process and where they're having issues or bottlenecks. And you'll become partners because you're discussing really that handoff and that overlap between the two teams. And what you're seeing on the left is the funnel. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering, we hear from some of our customers and companies that really having this executive support from the top is critical to get the attention of, usually it's the sales teams or the executives on the sales team to spend time to go through this collaborative effort, the mapping of the journey. What would you say to that? Does that sound about right? Or?
Yeah, it's definitely, I typically have worked with sales management and then probably one of their best reps to help pilot and to walk through it. So it's not the entire sales team, but it's certainly management and the strongest reps.
That's always helpful, right? If they're successful in doing well, then you can too, right?
And I would add to that, just for those that have international footprints, sales can be very different in terms of what that buying process looks like in a place like India or Japan or in the UK than it is in the States. And so be very aware of how that buying process is affected based on where they are geographically, because there is definitely some specific dynamics where the buying process is very different in other parts of the world than it is in the domestic United States.
Did that change your approach, Meagen?
Yeah, so if we look at the scoring piece of it, here on the right side you're seeing a scoring model. At DocuSign, we are a worldwide business as well in 189 different countries. And so we do have different models for different countries. We do have different types of content and types of programs that convert better in different countries. So we rank them higher, we give them more points, and we prioritize them in our scoring model. And we have built out, the one for Europe, we built out with the European team, taking that insight and their feedback in mind. So they're looking, when the leads come in and they're scored, they believe and agree and go in that order, and we're helping them be more efficient.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Great. And then I think if we transition to your next slide, this is an example of how you're tracking and really bringing that transparency to the organization.
Yes. The second, I think, big point is transparency and results. And that, on the prior slide, you saw the serious decisions funnel, and it talked about the inquiries, MQLs, SLs, et cetera. And you really have to make the definitions of the leads and how they progress through your CRM based off of that model and tie it to fields that you can actually measure. There's not a guess to it. Systematically, I can pull reports. I can create a dashboard. The one on the left here is a European example from last year, and it really models out the stages and where we're at. So every day I'm looking at the funnel for Europe. I'm looking at the funnel for Asia Pac. I'm looking at the funnel for corporate. I'm looking at the funnel for enterprise. And it's an indicator of where we are on our agreement and definitions. It's an indicator of the success of our pipeline, and it's something we, as marketers and as sales, both agree to as far as understanding our pipeline, and really taking that and we import it into a spreadsheet to see how we're tracking against industry benchmarks in a really nice, digestible way, and we communicate that out every other week in a sales flash to all of sales. But the other thing I think that's really important, not only monitoring your pipeline and the different stages so you can see, any bottlenecks, but also reporting on results on your spend as marketers. You want to build the confidence from your sales team that you are monitoring results, you're being very effective and efficient with the limited budget you've been given, and you're transparent in what's working and what's not working. Here it's just a mock slide, but it's a quadrant. You know, in the first half of the year, second half of the year, what had a high return and what didn't. And as marketers, we will drop the programs that did not have a high return, and we'll double down on the ones that did, and we'll try new things moving forward, and we're always open to feedback. But we're showing this to sales, we're showing this to the executive team, because we're getting their buy-in and the right to have our budget. And the right to ask for more budget next year because we were smart about it and we worked very closely. And what I see at DocuSign is when I need more budget, the first team that's supporting us for that is the sales team. The executive sales team is very supportive of what we need from a budgeting standpoint to help them be successful in hitting our revenue targets.
Absolutely.
Great.
It's so fundamental. I just want to chime in for 2 seconds that when you look at your effectiveness as an organization, you know, one of the things DocuSign has done and Meagen has done an excellent job of is really looking at what is your contribution to revenue. I mean, how do the initiatives, and whether you're doing product launches or lead generation programs or branding initiatives, if you look at something quarter over quarter, and I can speak to Mitsubishi Chemical as a good example, where if you looked at things quarter over quarter, you should be able to better understand how all of the initiatives you're doing are affecting that pipeline coverage, whether you're looking at it from a revenue perspective or from a coverage of a given percentage that marketing is responsible for. It's still very much about how are you contributing business value to the organization. And I think that's just a huge point that I just love the fact that Meagen brought up there that I wanted to further, I guess, communicate.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and these graphs are great, and this is a really great example for our audience, Meagen. Thank you for sharing just the power of alignment and bringing that visibility that really helps to further align and ultimately make the better business choices. So that's wonderful. Just a quick reminder to our audience, there is a little box in the right-hand corner of your screen. We'd love your questions. So we're hearing some really great examples from both Robert and Meagen. If you have questions for them at the end, we'll gather them up and read them then. Go to the next slide here. Oh, this is wonderful. So this is kind of the guts of how you got everyone working together. So talk about this, Meagen.
Yes. So, you know, I often start, you know, it was the beginning of our journey 2 years ago that we built the partnership, but it is not something that you can just do once and let it go. And I really love the statement that you need to partner with sales in a habitual way. It has to be part of everything you do every week and every message you send, and you're listening. You know, one, you have to get their attention. You have to be creative because they do have a lot of things coming at them. But two, you know, part of the successes I mentioned earlier, we started with a pilot with our top reps and management, and once we had success, we rolled it out to the greater audience, and we had them as advocates. We had results from the work that we did, and we shared that with the greater team. And a lot of your sales reps want to make club. They want to figure out what the people that are making club are doing to make club. And so if you can partner with them and help them and have those people be your advocates, your adoption rate will be much higher with the rest of the sales organization. So I think that was really key for the partnership, you know, making sure they understand the value prop to them and to hitting their number. Having executive support, you know, we meet every other week with our executives and sales, as you know, marketing and sales meet, and then we'll listen in on the different groups, you know, whether it's corporate sales or enterprise east and west, or our MDR team, you know, whatever the group is, we'll listen, we'll understand the challenges they're having, we'll be open to feedback and suggestions, and then we'll go execute it and let them know that we heard them and that we're trying to address that. And then it's always part of training. Every time you have, you know, most companies have a sales kickoff every year. That's a really important time to be involved, to be on stage, to, you know, even if it's just 15 minutes or 30 minutes, making sure you're there. If there's a mid-sales meeting, if there's QBR, you know, quarterly business reviews with your sales team, and then every time you onboard a new rep, making sure they understand the tools, the scoring, the templates you have available, the content, you know, all of that's important, and to continue to reiterate that and train them, and just really working with the sales team.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And Robert, from your experience working with your different clients, I would imagine you would also say this is key. Any examples you can share with us?
You know, I think in terms, the question is in terms of getting sales partnered within marketing or getting them to work together?
Mm-hmm. In that habitual, partnering with sales in that habitual way.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is you have to kind of have a service, well, you have to absolutely have a service level agreement. You have to have consistent communication, and Meagen already touched on this prior, but it's a team effort. And, you know, sales and marketing have for years had very different perspectives. Marketing tends to be more longer-term mentality. Sales is about making the number. And having had to oversee both teams or both departments at points in my career, you kind of have to walk that balance. And I think what's exciting today is that it's more about how do you contribute value to the business. And, you know, you're going to have a VP of sales, you're going to have a VP of marketing, or more preferably, in my perspective, somebody who oversees both of those departments that are going to be responsible for creating the business value that those two departments should create. And that's a hugely, hugely important responsibility in terms of all the dynamics that are involved in that. So when I've worked with a lot of clients at a divisional level, a lot of times it starts with, what's that service level agreement? What are we both agreeing to, whether it be contribution to revenue or pipeline coverage? But it really, to Megan's point, becomes incredibly important that you just get in the same room together and really talk about how are you trying to drive the opportunities and objectives that you have as a business.
Could you talk just a little bit more about SLAs? We hear from so many of our customers that, you know, marketing is producing a fabulous number of highly scored leads, more than ever before, but they don't feel like they're always being followed up on, right? It's that, you know, typical tug between sales and marketing. How do tools like this and this kind of approach and communication help remedy that?
Well, I think that one of the things that's tremendously important is you have to give salespeople accessibility to their environment beyond just at the office. And, you know, to throw a plug out there for mobile packs in particular, there's tools available to sales departments that haven't been available in the past. And so it becomes tremendously important that as you look at how you're going to position your salespeople, or better put, to enable your salespeople, to focus specifically on the areas of the buying process that can make them and the business most effective, that you have to look at technology solutions beyond just, I still remember the point when I first got into sales where it was Goldmine and ACT, and I was you know, tied to my computer. Today I spend most of my time, as do many of my clients and their sales departments and salespeople, as does marketing, on their laptop and on their mobile phone. So you've got to
Is that the kind of thing that you put in an SLA between sales and marketing, or is that just the responsibility of management to make those tools accessible? You know,
I think that the SLA becomes fundamental in terms of getting an agreement between sales and marketing, and it does in many cases start at the executive level. It's not normally going to come from a managerial level. You have to have people like Megan, her peer, and the sales side that really come together and say, here's what we're responsible for. Let's say you're big or small, whether you've got a $5 million revenue target or a $3 billion revenue target. Each department has to have total visibility into what their responsibilities are to that CEO or to that, you know, that organization as a whole. So as you build those service level agreements, and I've worked on a number of them, they can be as simple as you are responsible for this much pipeline coverage, to as complex as getting into specific areas of, at a divisional level, where you need to, as a marketing department, drive certain brand awareness and drive certain loyalty responsibilities. So again, one of the things I mentioned earlier is the difference in the dynamic between B2b and B2c, and it's always hard in a webinar of this, you know, at this timeline type of thing to really dive into both. But as you look at your organization, that service level agreement will change or be more so suited for your organization based on what the objectives are, and obviously as you get sales and marketing in the same room. But what it comes down to is get sales and marketing in the same room and come up with an agreement for how you're going to accomplish your objectives.
Great, great. And then this last slide here is kind of summarizing the results, Meagen. Can you just kind of share with us, how does it compare to when you started out, and did you really see a decrease in that, suppose it's 52% of lost sales?
Yeah, so, I definitely by communicating, building it together, and being transparent, we gained insights and we had more efficiencies. Within a quarter of launching a lot of our just nurture programs and these sort of SLAs and the content that we needed, we saw doubling in our pipeline, and the following quarter a tripling. And there's many factors involved, but I think one key thing was we were working together to row in the same direction, and we were complementing what we needed to get done to move business.
Excellent. All right. And then some of those sound, did you actually have KPIs or, the lead conversion, like percentage increase that you saw that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, we did. We did increase our lead conversion rates. We got them really beyond even industry standards. We had more predictable revenue. We could actually see, most companies will just look at, do I have 4x pipeline or 3x pipeline, and not, hey, okay, I have volume of leads, but are they actually being qualified? And then are they actually, being accepted by sales and turned into opportunities? So yes, we had a lot better information and insight into our funnel.
Okay, well that's great. We are nearing the end of our webinar, and we just have a couple more slides to go. And the slides are really on the benefits of technology. I think especially compared to 5 years ago, there are so many tools on the market that really enable the sales and marketing alignment. Maybe just starting with you, Meagen, can you talk to us a little bit about, we have marketing technology, CRM, I think with it Robert who said 3 legs of the stool. Love to hear your perspectives on the use of these tools and how important they are.
Sure. So I'm a huge fan of marketing technology, and I think it's a major competitive advantage for any company. One, you've got to have a marketing database to work from. You need to be able to do lead scoring to make your sales team more efficient, to provide them with better insight on the buyer. You need, a place to be able to nurture, and so I love, the Eloquas, the Pardots, the HubSpots, and Marketos of the world, and I myself could not live without them, and I think they're a huge advantage for my sales team because we've rolled this out. And when I look at the next kind of layer is, okay, now you've got the infrastructure with these marketing technologies. What are you doing to layer in business intelligence? Because it's not just what they give you on the form, it's all the other, as the Eloqua terms it, digital body language that you get from DemandBase, for instance, who is giving you information that you don't have to ask, size of company, industry, etc., or the other tools like Mentigo and Lattice Engines, who are giving you data outside of what you collect. They're telling you if they're buying products like Salesforce, or if they're hiring in sales, whatever those other information you can get off the internet that they're trolling and capturing and helping you. There's 1,000 attributes they're collecting versus I may only be collecting 12 currently. So, I just love where we're going on big data and what, as a marketer, we have access to.
And Robert, how about some of the other tools on the market? So not only the 3 legs, but we're talking mobile packs, proposal automation, contract, order entry. What are you seeing out there today, and what's really making a difference?
Well, I think there's two areas, and some of the organizations that were on the prior 3 slides have addressed this in terms of acquisitions or partnerships. But you've got the social aspect of bringing in social technology that enables you to understand how people are interacting. This is tremendously important from a consumer perspective. The next piece really, and again, to just make a point regarding mobile packs, which, by the way, again, thanks very much, Shannon, for inviting Meagen and I to participate in this, that, there's an aspect of how sales enablement has changed from just marketing, providing qualified leads, to, which is still something that a lot of companies are struggling and or trying to address, to providing really the salespeople with their own platform. And I think, mobile packs, and I know there's a couple of other competitors out there like ShowPad, although I wouldn't, I'm definitely a big mobile packs fan.
That's okay.
big mobile packs fan, but I have to throw out the competitor because I can't be, got to be agnostic, right? Is that you have to, look at how can you enable your sales team. And I think, when you look at those things like proposals and RFP automation, and one of the things that isn't mentioned on this slide that a lot of my clients, and I know many VPs of sales out there are going to, as well as CEOs, which I'm sure Shannon and Meagen can appreciate, is that a solution like a mobile packs, for example, really helps you protect your intellectual property. When you have hundreds, if not thousands, of salespeople running around the world, if not the country, with your content and your sales decks and the things that you have going on, there's an enablement aspect to it, but there's also the fact that you as an organization need to put yourselves in positions to have solutions that can not only enable the salespeople, but also obviously protect your core intellectual property. And I guess to answer your question, Shannon, that's one of the other things that I feel like is extremely strong in terms of some of the sales enablement tools that are available today.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of great stuff out there, and then the power of using the technology and really making sure it's aligned with the sales marketing process and the teams can really increase results dramatically. So thank you both for that, Meagen and Robert. This has been a fabulous webinar. Hopefully everyone in the audience is able to take away a few things from our webinar today. We certainly went over the buyer's journey and the importance of that in the sales enablement process. Fabulous examples from DocuSign, how you actually did it and the success that you've achieved. And then, of course, I ended with the importance of technology. We are out of time. Thank you for everyone who has sent in questions. We'll be sure to respond to you after the webinar. And we'll also be sending out a presentation and recording of the webinar shortly. So thank you, everyone.
Shannon, I would just add that, if you have questions that go beyond the webinar, obviously because we're short on time, you can use the hashtag for Twitter, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, SMA, and Meagen and I, as well as Shannon, will do our best to respond to you regarding those questions.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you.